The U.S. Constitution is treated as a sacred document and a holy grail of governance. But let's be honest, it's also an eccentric patchwork of 18th century compromises, some lofty ideals, and a few head-scratching oddities. Drafted in an age of powdered wigs and wooden teeth, it's no surprise this founding document has some strange rules and overlooked idiosyncrasies that would make even the founding fathers chuckle. Or cringe. Welcome to the Disenchanted, where we question everything, especially the status quo. This channel is all about honest engagement. We encourage critical thinking. We will not be conformed to social constructs, societal narratives, and toxic positivity. There are no rose-colored glasses here. Please share your thoughts and opinions below. And like and subscribe. The mic is hot. Now let's take a look at some of the weirder bits hiding in America's most celebrated rulebook. The Pirate Problem Clause is tucked into Article 1, Section 8. You'll find Congress has the power to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas. Yes, pirates were a legit concern back in 1787. Forget Netflix and chill. Back then, the founders were all about cannons and commandeering. While it's fun to imagine Congress debating what to do with a captured Captain Jack Sparrow, the clause feels hilariously dated today. Pirates aren't exactly a modern menace, unless you count torrenting Game of Thrones, and yet this rule is still on the books. Then there's the infamous 3/5 compromise, where the founders decided enslaved people counted as 3/5 of a person for representation purposes. It's the constitutional equivalent of saying, you're human, but not fully human. If this sounds morally bankrupt to you, congratulations, you're a decent person. The absurdity of quantifying humanity like a grocery store scale is one of those moments where the Constitution stops being quaint and starts being deeply unsettling. Thankfully, this rule was undone by the 14th Amendment, but it's a glaring reminder that the founders weren't exactly flawless geniuses. Sometimes they were just dudes in stockings making bad decisions. The president's impeachment-free perks. You'd think a document meant to limit government power would keep a close eye on the presidency, right? Well, sort of. The Constitution gives Congress the power to impeach a president, but here's the kicker. There's no clause preventing a president from pardoning themselves. Yes, the Constitution leaves the door open for a president to throw themselves a get-out-of-jail-free party. It's like writing rules for Monopoly and forgetting to ban cheating. While no president has tried this move yet, the mere possibility makes you wonder if the founders ever paused to ask, hey, what if the president turns out to be a narcissist? The Second Amendment. The ambiguous right to bear arms, and maybe grammar. The Second Amendment is perhaps the Constitution's most famous example of vagueness. It reads, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. Wait, what? Is the right for militias or for everyone? Are we talking muskets or bazookas? And what's up with the commas? The grammar here is so chaotic, it could have come from a founding father's drunk cousin. Debates rage on, but one thing is clear. The founders probably didn't anticipate modern weaponry or the sheer power of a misused semicolon. The vice president's strange job description. Being vice president is a bit like being the backup quarterback. Technically important, but you're mostly just there to look busy. According to the Constitution, the VP's main job is presiding over the Senate, which sounds impressive, until you realize it mostly involves sitting around and breaking ties once in a blue moon. And let's not forget, the Constitution originally had the vice presidency go to the runner-up in the presidential race. Can you imagine that today? Picture 2016's White House with Trump as president and Hillary as VP. Talk about awkward elevator rides. The Elastic Clause, Congress gets a stretchy power band. The Elastic Clause, found in Article 1, Section 8, gives Congress the power to make laws deemed necessary and proper to carry out its duties. Basically, it's the Constitution's because I said so clause. While it's a handy way to keep up with new challenges, looking at you, internet regulation, it's also delightfully vague. Necessary and proper could mean anything from creating NASA to funding a national cat video archive. The founders clearly believed in leaving room for interpretation, or maybe they just ran out of parchment. The lack of term limits for Congress, forever politicians. The Constitution sets term limits for the president but says nothing about Congress. This means senators and representatives can stay in office for decades, turning Congress into a kind of retirement home for career politicians. It's ironic that the founders, so wary of monarchy, essentially created a system where someone could rule a district for life. Maybe they assumed people would get bored of power after a few years. Spoiler alert, they don't. The preamble, lofty words, loophole reality. Let's not forget the preamble, the Constitution's opening act, which promises to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. Sounds amazing, right? Except none of this is enforceable. The preamble is more of a mission statement than a rule book, like a company motto that says, "We care about you," while simultaneously slashing your benefits. It's beautiful rhetoric, but it's also the Constitution's way of saying, "We'll try, but no promises." The 18th Amendment, the Great Prohibition Experiment. The Prohibition, a constitutional amendment that gave the U.S. one of its wildest and most ironic eras. The 18th Amendment banned the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol, effectively launching an entire underground economy fueled by speakeasies, bootleggers, and mobsters. The irony? Prohibition was supposed to make society more moral and orderly, but it ended up creating more crime, corruption, and really bad bathtub gin. It's the constitutional equivalent of a parent saying, "You're grounded," only to find their kid throwing a house party with a live band. By the time the 21st Amendment repealed prohibition, America had learned an important lesson. Banning booze is like trying to ban people from binge-watching Netflix. It's just not going to happen. The Fugitive Slave Clause, a dark spot in the fine print. Buried in Article 4, there's a clause requiring that escaped enslaved people be returned to their owners, even if they fled to a free state. This is one of those constitutional kinks that's less ha-ha and more wow. That's horrifying. It's a chilling reminder that the Constitution was, at times, less about universal liberty and more about appeasing powerful interests. Sure, the Civil War and subsequent amendments eventually corrected this atrocity, but the fact that it was there at all feels like a bad plot twist in an otherwise interesting movie. The Coinage Clause, no fancy titles for you. The Constitution explicitly forbids the U.S. government from granting titles of nobility. No dukes, no lords, no fancy hats. At first glance, this seems like a no-brainer for a republic. But consider the possibilities. Who wouldn't want a Secretary of Sass or a Duke of Dad jokes? The founders' intention was to keep the U.S. from resembling Europe's aristocracy, but they also robbed us of some serious meme potential. Imagine a reality where we had noble titles like Baron of Barbecue or Viscount of Vibes. Sure, it's impractical, but it's also hilarious to imagine Congress debating over who gets to be the Earl of Avocado Toast. The Census Clause, counting people, and other awkward math. Every 10 years, the Constitution mandates a national head count. It sounds simple enough, but the execution is always a mess. How do you count people without annoying them? Should pets count? What about ghosts? Okay, maybe not ghosts. The founders couldn't have foreseen the modern chaos of the census. People avoiding the survey out of privacy concerns or just plain forgetting to send it in. Back in the day, it probably involved a guy with a quill knocking on doors and asking, "So, how many of you are crammed into this log cabin?" Fast forward a couple centuries, and it's an awkward government reminder that humans are bad at paperwork. The Electoral College, a group project gone wrong. Let's talk about the Electoral College, a system so convoluted it feels like it was designed after a long night at the bar. Instead of electing a president by popular vote, we have this middleman system of electors who technically decide the outcome. The idea was to balance power between states and prevent mob rule, but in practice, it's like a Rube Goldberg machine for democracy. It's especially infuriating when a candidate loses the popular vote but still wins the presidency. The Electoral College is the group project of government. Even if most of the group agrees, one rogue participant can derail the whole thing. Amendments. The Constitution's patch notes. Adding an amendment to the Constitution is like downloading a software update. It's supposed to fix things, but sometimes it just creates new bugs. Out of 27 amendments, some have been wildly impactful. See abolition of slavery, women's suffrage, while others are oddly niche. Take the 27th Amendment, for example. It prevents Congress from giving itself an immediate pay raise. It sounds logical, but it was first proposed in 1789 and wasn't ratified until 1992. That's a 203-year gap, longer than it took to invent electricity, land on the moon, and develop Wi-Fi. Apparently, even the founders procrastinated. The Commerce Clause, regulating everything, basically. The Commerce Clause gives Congress the power to regulate trade between states, which seems reasonable until you realize how broadly it can be interpreted. Over the years, it's been used to justify everything from workplace safety laws to, well, banning dancing in footloose towns. While its flexibility has made it a powerful tool, it also highlights the Constitution's tendency to leave things a little too open-ended. The founders probably didn't imagine their words being used to regulate internet cookies or decide whether pineapple belongs on pizza. Spoiler, it doesn't. A founding document, flaws and all. The Constitution is like an old family recipe, full of good intentions, weird quirks, and the occasional questionable ingredient. It's a document that reflects the complexities, contradictions, and compromises of its time, all while trying to govern a future it couldn't possibly predict. Sure, some of its rules make us scratch our heads or roll our eyes, but it's a living, evolving testament to the messy, imperfect art of democracy. And if nothing else, it proves that even the most serious documents can have their moments of unintentional comedy. After all, who doesn't love a little pirate drama, ambiguous grammar, or the occasional congressional pay raise loophole? For all its kinks, contradictions, and downright absurdities, the Constitution is a fascinating piece of work. It's a mix of brilliant foresight and glaring blind spots, a snapshot of its time that somehow still governs ours. The Founding Fathers were human. They made mistakes, argued about commas, and occasionally forgot to plan for narcissistic presidents or infinite re-election campaigns. And in that imperfection lies the Constitution's distinctive character, a document that, much like the nation it created, is perpetually a work in progress. Leave a comment below letting me know which of these shocked you the most, or better yet, add to this unsettling list. Until we meet again, question everything you've been told and embrace the disenchanted truth.